Hey, um, I want to talk about something really, really good. You already know what it is because you saw the title of the video, right? I just finished it uh, maybe a half an hour ago, and I'm in that place that I think we all chase, that sort of perfect stillness in the wake of finishing something really incredible for the first time. Like when you read a really good book, or you see a really good movie, or play a really good game, see a really great concert. Those moments where you interface with art in a way that feels revolutionary. Um, and so I hope I can compose myself well enough to give thoughts on this. I thought it would be interesting to try and do this while I'm in this sort of place. Because I've been thinking about the fact that I wanted to do this. I wanted to make a review about Disco Elysium since pretty early in on playing it. Um, I haven't done a review of something in a while. I haven't done a review of a game. I haven't done a review of anything that wasn't a book on this channel yet. I've talked briefly about things, other things, given my thoughts about them, but not in a very prolonged, sort of focused way. Um, so I have prepared a little bit, but I mean, you know me, I don't write things down. I don't bullet point or make notes or lists or anything before I go into filming. I just think about it and think about kind of generally what I want to say. And if I forget something, if I miss something, that's just the way it is. So why don't I give you the trailer here for the game? It's just a minute long. Here you go.
In the great city, at the end of the world, there's a dead body behind the hostile cafeteria, and a strike that's about to become a war. Precinct 57 sent their finest. Precinct 41 sends you. Prove them wrong, or lose your mind. Disco Elysium. Get it now.
Okay, so now that you've seen that, you have some idea of what it's about a little bit and what it looks like. It is an RPG, and it was initially released for the PC in October of 2019. But then in the spring of this year, early this year, 2021, they released a new updated version called the Final Cut for PC, and then the Final Cut was also released for PS4 and PS5. And then just a little over a week ago, Final Cut was released on the Switch, which is how I played it. When it first came out, when Disco Elysium first came out, I started playing it on PC. My PC that I'm filming with right now is a tower that's very old. I built it in 2013, so it's showing its age. And so I was playing it on my then wife's computer, but then shortly after we separated, and I was not able to finish the game. I only played maybe 6 or 8 hours of the game, and it's about a 30-hour game. Um, and I try at one point I tried running it on my PC and it just wouldn't work. I think it probably should work, but there was some sort of interfacing issue with my graphics card where it was just causing the graphics to like freak out and make the game crash every time I tried to run it, and I couldn't figure out how to fix it. So I decided to wait for the Switch port. I could have played it on PS4, but I just felt like I wanted to do Switch. I thought, I think I have these idealized dreams of that I'm going to be playing games in bed, and that didn't really end up happening. I played this mostly on the television. But I'll talk at the end a little bit about my thoughts about the Switch port particularly. Generally, for most of this review, I'm just going to be talking about the game itself, not necessarily the technical problems that it has running on the Switch. So, Disco Elysium is a role-playing game. It is inspired by isometric RPGs of the Infinity Engine from the 90s, like Baldur's Gate, or more particularly in this instance, Planescape Torment, which was a game that had a lot less of a focus on combat and a lot more of a focus on dialogue. Disco Elysium takes that to the most degree, though, where there is no combat in a traditional sense. Everything is performed through dialogue. And I'm going to talk, I decided, about, because there are two major things that I need to talk about when I review this game. The first thing is the story, of course, and then the other thing is the mechanics of the game, how the game works. And I think that the problem is that this is a mystery. This is a mystery game. It's a detective story. And so the amount that I can say about the story without giving things away is fairly small. And I think that it would feel a lot less interesting than the mechanics of the game are. The mechanics of the game are very interesting. I'm going to talk about that first, actually. So like I said, it's an RPG, but it's entirely dialogue-based. There's no sort of action or combat or turns or anything like that. And, there are a lot of games that are RPGs that are, you have different skills and skill trees and things, and you level your skills up, and there are a billion different ways to do it, and even down to something like Baldur's Gate that was just directly an adaptation of the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And I think that when I think about RPGs, the sort of baseline in my mind is I'm thinking about Dungeons and Dragons, because like Baldur's Gate and third edition 3.5 for me specifically, that was like how I first was introduced to role playing systems, like hardcore dice rolling role playing systems. I had played RPGs before, like Pokemon is a classic example of a turn-based RPG that's targeted towards children, and Earthbound and other things like that. But those games don't have skill progression in the same way. It's not as controlled by the player like it is in something like Baldur's Gate or in Dungeons and Dragons. And so Disco Elysium is based on a role-playing tabletop system that was designed by Robert Kurvitz. So this was developed by a very small Estonian developer and publisher, self-published, named Zaum, ZA/UM, which is headed by Robert Kurvitz, who is a novelist, and he designed the role playing system that the game implements. He's the head designer and head writer of the game, and the game is set in a fictional world that he has created. So he's the true brainchild behind the entire operation. The thing that's interesting about this is that in a lot of ways it's not entirely dissimilar from Dungeons and Dragons. We have 24 skills on our character sheet into 4 separate sort of categories of 6 apiece. And at the beginning of the game, we put some points into our 4 different categories, and then that determines, how many points we have in the smaller individual skills, and then it also determines the max level cap that we can level those skills up to. Very similar to, the skills of Dungeons and Dragons, but the skills in Disco Elysium are particularly interesting. I'm gonna just run through them all really quickly, and they have on your character sheet a little sort of 1-sentence explanation and then a much longer explanation. If I read all of the longer explanations, this video would be way too long, so I'm just gonna run through the quick ones. So in the category of intellect, we have logic, which is wielding raw intellectual power to deduce the world. We have encyclopedia, which is calling upon all of your knowledge to produce fascinating trivia about the world and its history. Rhetoric, which is the practice of the art of persuasion. Use this to enjoy rigorous intellectual discourse. Drama. You can use this to play the actor and lie and detect when others around you are lying. Conceptualization, which is understanding creativity, giving you the ability to see the art present in the world around you. And finally, visual calculus, which is your ability to reconstruct crime scenes, make the laws of physics work for the law itself. Then in the category of psyche, you have volition, which is hold yourself together and keep your morale up. This is directly related to, there are 2 sort of health bars in the game. Your physical health and your morale. Doing physical things that can hurt you can lower your health, and doing things that can upset you or hurt your morale will lower your morale, and if either reach 0, then you will die. The next one in Psyche is my personal favorite, Inland Empire, the David Lynch skill, named after the film of David Lynch's. Hunches and gut feelings, dreams within waking life. Empathy, which is your ability to understand others, work your mirror neurons. The authority skill, intimidate the public and assert yourself. Esprit de corps, this is the ability to connect to your police station and understand cop culture. Suggestion, charm men and women and play the puppet master. Then in the category of physique, we have endurance, take the blows, don't let the world kill you. This is the one that's directly correlated to your health. So leveling up your endurance and your volition will level up your health and your morale, respectively. Pain threshold, shrug off the pain, they will have to hurt you more. Physical instrument, flex powerful muscles, enjoy healthy organs. Electrochemistry, go to party planet, love and be loved by drugs. Shivers, raise the hair on your neck, tune in to the city around you. Half-light, let your body take control, threaten people. And then the final category, motorics, hand-eye coordination, ready, aim, fire. Perception. See, hear, and smell everything. Allow no detail to go unnoticed. Reaction speed. The quickest to react. An untouchable man. Savoir-faire. Sneak under their noses. Stun them with immense panache. Interfacing. Master machines. Pick locks. Pick pockets. And finally, composure. Straighten your back. Keep your poker face. So, for instance, when I created my character, I put the majority of my points into the psyche and intellect categories, with very little in my physique and motorics skills. So this meant that I had a lot of power to understand people, talk to people, but I was very bad at doing anything that was physical. So if I needed to break down a door, for instance, was not going to have a good time. If I needed to throw something accurately, was not going to have a good time. If I had to fight somebody, was not going to have a good time. But if I needed to figure out if someone was lying, or if I needed to manipulate someone, if I needed to assert my dominance over someone and use, intellectual trickery, I was very good. The two skills that I put most of my points into were Encyclopedia, which provides you lots of sort of interesting information about the context of the world that the game is set in, because it's entirely fictional. There's this massive fictional 6,000-year history that Robert Kurvitz has created for this world that the game is set in, and this allows you to learn a lot more about it. And then the other one I dumped a lot of points into was Inland Empire, the David Lynch one, which basically allows you to sort of attune yourself to the paranatural things in the world and sort of embrace the madness around you, which I found to be very fun. And so how these actually come into play are through skill checks. So just like Dungeons and Dragons, in Dungeons and Dragons, when you want to do something that is, beyond like a basic ability of most people, you have to make a skill check. If you want to jump across a gap, or if you want to shoot something with an arrow or anything, you have to look at your skills, and then you roll a 20-sided die, and you add the modifier to it that's based on how good you are at that skill, and if it's high enough, then you succeed. In Disco Elysium, it's not entirely dissimilar. It's based on rolling 2d6, two 6-sided dice, and you are adding in modifiers based on your skills, but it's a lot more interesting and subtle than the Dungeons and Dragons system. First of all, as you're playing through the game, there's text happening. The text is very smartly designed. It's all on the right side of the screen in a narrow column, almost newspaper-like, that allows it to be very readable and not get in the way of the action in the main part of the screen. And as you're talking to people, reading things, you have basically what amounts to conversations with yourself, where all of these different skills are represented by a voice, basically, inside of your mind. And as the game progresses, there are silent, secret skill checks that are being rolled in the background without your knowledge. And if you succeed at one, that voice will then pop up and say something. They can guide you. If you're interrogating someone and you pass a secret drama check, it might pop up and tell you that this person is lying. Sometimes you'll just be doing something and you'll pass a random Inland Empire check, and it will tell you, hey, do this really crazy random thing that doesn't make sense. Just do it right now. Trust me. You need to do this. It's a very interesting thing, and when you start leveling up, if you do something like I did, where I had a pretty good amount of points in logic, but I also had a lot of points in Inland Empire, they would fight. They would say contradictory things. They would be pitted against each other. There's the tug of war of these two sides of my psyche, which is very interesting. But then, of course, there were skill checks that you would choose to undertake as a sort of dialogue option. These are going to be like decisions that you're making, basically, and you know, paths that you have to take, skills that you have to, like, similar to, like, if there's, for instance, there's a part where you need to get into a freezer and the freezer is frozen shut, and so you have to pass a skill check to get the freezer open, right? There are two types of these checks. There are red ones and white ones, and they both operate in basically the same basic way, where you will see the text choice saying what you will do, and then a little thing will pop up, and it will tell you the probability of you succeeding. And the probability will range anywhere from 3% to 97%, because you can always crit and succeed, but you can also always crit and fail. So there's no guarantees. And then it will also give you a little, it's associated skill, and it will show you, like, here's what is being added to your modifiers because of your skill. But then also other things will add to your skills too, like your clothes, though your clothes will modify your skills as well. But then also other options you've taken before can affect later things in the game. Does this person that you're talking to trust you? If so, then they're more likely to do what you want, etc., etc. With a red check, you have one chance. You roll the dice, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, and then you are left to suffer the consequences or reap the rewards. In the case of a white check, that can be redone. Sometimes you can do a thing in the game, in the world, that will allow you to then go back and retake the skill. The other option is to, when you level up, you can spend a skill point to level up one of your skills, and if you level up the skill associated with a white check, you can then go back and attempt the white check again, and you'll have a higher chance of succeeding now because your skill is at a higher level. One thing that this game... So I will say this quickly. This game is the best I've ever seen a game replicate the feeling of playing a tabletop RPG in the digital space, in a narrative single-player game. Because the mechanics are going to be there no matter what, but the way that it feels like this almost limitless game that's encouraging you to try different things, do things different ways, experiment. And one thing that I really like about it is how it handles failing rolls. It's not like a lot of, games where if you just fail, that means, bad, and then you have to try again until you get it right. People who play Dungeons and Dragons or games similar know that, like, failing a roll is, that's an opportunity for something interesting to happen, right? And that's how Disco Elysium handles that as well. The other thing about the skill system that's really interesting is that you can go too far. So when you look at the more nuanced info for something like empathy, empathy breaks into the souls of others and forces you to feel what's inside. It enables you to notice social cues others may miss, perhaps a hidden sadness that you could coax out a little more, or a strange joy from someone who should be bereaved, or a hidden resentment that could return to harm you later. However, at high levels, empathy really puts you in other people's shoes. You will cry for their sorrows, punch walls to relieve their angers, and be an even more unstable cop. However, with very low empathy, you will be an ungainly beast, unable to talk to anyone without upsetting them. So it's like you're constantly... There's a tug, there's a give and take, right? You don't want to be really low leveled on things, but you don't want to get too high either. I got pretty high on level for Inland Empire. I got to 10. You can go higher than that, but that's how high I got. At high levels, Inland Empire animates the inanimate. You will have conversations with your clothing, conversations that may change the course of the investigation if you are not thrown into the loony bin first. The other major thing I wanted to talk about the sort of mechanics of the game, I sort of touched on about how it feels so similar to an RPG, a tabletop RPG, in the broadness of it. So the script for the game is said to be over 1 million words, which is a lot. If you think of The Great Gatsby is 50,000 words, and so 10 times that at 500,000 words, you've got something like Infinite Jest or War and Peace. Those are both around 550,000 words. And so this game's script is double that. It's double War and Peace. But you're not going to see all of that in one playthrough. This is a 30-hour game, where it's got a script in a similar size to something like Baldur's Gate 2, but is less than half the length, time-wise. The script size is because of the huge range of possibilities of things that can happen in the game. And I think this is exemplified by the other major technical thing in the game, which is the thought cabinet. Now, the thought cabinet is really interesting, and it's probably the most interesting conceit that the game has on a technical level. And the way that Robert Kurvitz explained it in this video that he did talking about the process of developing the game, he said, in a traditional RPG, you are getting loot, right? And how do you get loot? You kill things, and then you take loot from their bodies. But if we're making a game that doesn't have any killing, and it doesn't have any looting, all it has is talking, what do we gain from talking to people? Ideas. And so the thought cabinet is a sort of loot system for ideas. As you go through the game, choices you make and events that occur can cause you to have an idea. And if you choose, you can take that idea, focus on it for a period of time that depends on the different thought, and after thinking about it long enough, you can then internalize it, and it will give you some sort of unknown advantage or disadvantage. Some have both, some have neither. It depends. And so some of the ones that I ended up with were one that I got really early on was having an inexplicable feminist agenda. I was making dialogue choices that showed that I had this feminist agenda, and then it was like, maybe we should think about this, and I incorporated it into my personality. Another one was volumetric shit compressor, which was your ability to try and get your shit together. There was the actual art degree, which was really interesting. It was very helpful because it gave you the ability that every time you passed a conceptualization check, you healed 1 morale and gained 10 experience, and 100 experience gained you a level. But the downside was that you lose 1 to your hand-eye coordination because your hands constantly shake from how angry you are at how shitty everything is around you. Another particularly interesting one was there's a point in the game where you need to get into a place and it is sealed off. And there are a couple ways that you can do it. Of course, like I said, the options are very bountiful. The 3 ways that I discovered, there could be more that I didn't even discover, are you can sort of get in through a back way that requires an amount of acrobatics that I did not feel confident that my character could pull off. And then at the front gate, it is being guarded by a very large, buff, tattooed neo-Nazi, basically. A super racist. And you can fight him, but I couldn't fight him. I was going to lose really badly. The other way that you could get him to let you in was by letting him teach you about advanced race theory, which was his scientific understanding of racial superiority. And if you internalized his racism, he would allow you to enter the place that he was guarding. And I reluctantly did that because I didn't feel like I could get around him any other way. And the game even was like, it presented me with the choice of having the thought, like, do I really have to be racist? And it's like, well, you're just learning about what racist people think. Doesn't mean you have to act on it. Right? Another thing that I got early on in the game was one of the additions for the new Final Cut edition of the game, which is one of the political vision quests. There are 4 political vision quests that you can undertake now, where you will have a thought and you level it in your thought cabinet, and then it will give you a quest line to fulfill your political aspirations. And so I became a Mazovian economist, which is the in-game version of Marxist communism. Mazov is the Marx of the world of this game. And so, at one point my brain was like, hey, it seems like you want to get communism started. Is that true? And then if you say yes, I give that a thumbs up, then you can, undertake this quest line where you have to seek out your fellow comrades and organize. And very interesting. So I think that's more than enough talking about the mechanics of the game. The game itself, as that trailer probably showed you, is that there is this dead body in a tree behind a hostel, and in this neighborhood where there is a conflict between this major international shipping company and the dock workers union. The dock workers are on strike, and it could boil over into bloodshed at any moment. The area is this sort of unclaimed territory that is under the jurisdiction of 2 different police precincts, though neither want anything to do with it. And Precinct 57 has sent their best, Lieutenant Kim Kitsuragi, and Precinct 41 has sent you. At the outset of the game, you wake up nude and hungover in your trashed hotel room, and you do not remember anything. You do not know who you are. You do not know where you are. You do not know anything. As you exit the room, you meet a woman also staying in the hotel, Classier, who tells you that you are a cop and that there's a dead body that's been hanging in the tree for a week, and that you got here 3 days ago, but you haven't done anything except get drunk and threaten to kill yourself constantly because you're such a horrible mess, shit show of a person. And so the game presents a sort of parallel mystery, the mystery of who killed the man in the tree, and the mystery of who am I, the main character of this game. And it's a very interesting conceit and an interesting parallel. And it's cool because since this is taking place in a world that's fictional, we, the player, know nothing about it and its history and its culture, but our character doesn't either, and so we learn as he learns about that world. And it's a really interesting world. It's a world that's very similar in a lot of ways to our world. It takes place in a world called Elysium, which is made up of isolas, which are masses of land and sea separated from each other by something called the Pale, which is a sort of mist-like ether where the laws of reality break down, and if you're exposed to it for too long, it can make you go crazy. The events of the game take place uh, in a neighborhood called Martinez, which is within the city of Revachol, which is on the isla of Insulinde. Um, so this is all stuff that you're going to learn quickly as you start playing. The game takes place in the year of something 51, and 49 years before the game, there was a communist revolution that took place in Revachol, which overthrew the monarchy, which controlled the city. But then within 6 years, it was toppled by an invasion of various allied countries under proponents of capitalism and what the game refers to as moralism, which is basically like neoliberalism. The city of Revachol has since been placed under administration of this coalition of other countries, which controls it, but to a particular minimum. They're very hands off, and the only sort of real governance that the area has is the Revachol Citizens Militia, which is what you are, the police force, which is backed by this coalition of nations, but has very little in the way of actual influence, and even less in the way of funding or respect from the people, right? Because they're generally considered, the people who are working for them are considered to be, neoliberal lapdogs for this, colonial empire that is controlling the city of Revachol. The part of Martinez where you are is the site of a major harbor, and like I said, the dock workers are on strike, and so basically, you start the game out, you meet your partner for this, Kim Kitsuragi, and you start investigating, you start exploring, you start meeting the people, you start learning about the history of the world. And it's interesting because you can undertake the game in various ways. I was trying to be a very empathetic and do good person, despite the fact that I learned more and more as I played that who I am was a pretty sad, worthless, maybe not worthless, but very flawed alcoholic man. But I could have played it different. I could have put all of my points into physical. I could have been a badass. I could have been a fascist. I could have fucked shit up. And I'm gonna play it again and do that. I think this game has an incredible amount of replayability because even though it's a murder mystery, right? And so no matter what I do, who killed this man is the same. And I think I had a pretty good ending. I solved the crime. I figured out, for the most part, who I was. And at the end of the game, there's a section where you are sort of tasked with proving to your colleagues that you're, not a worthless piece of shit. And they seemed to reluctantly accept the fact that I did my job and am at least somewhat competent. But there are tons of things that I never got to explore, places that I never got into because I didn't have the skills to break down doors or whatever, side quests that I never really completed, people that I probably didn't get to meet. Um, and so I think that going through and playing it again with a different character build, with a different ideology behind them, would be very interesting to see the different sides of the world, and also to see how the people interact with you differently when you're a different person, right? For instance, like Kim, your partner, he's a foreign by uh, his parents are foreign born, and he is not white, basically, who the people of Roshal are. And so, like, if I were to adopt, fascist ideology and racist ideology, how would that affect my working relationship with him? I'd be interested to see. Um, I will say of the story itself, this is the best written game ever. The quality of the prose is astonishing. There are well written games, certainly, but this one is just a full head above everything else that has ever been done. Um, it was astonishing to me how well written this game is. Um, and the story itself, beyond just the sort of technical prowess of Kurvitz and his team to actually compose prose, was really affecting. Um, there were a lot of one thing that I really loved about it was that you're exploring the world, you're meeting these people, you're seeing these places, you're uncovering these mysteries, and it's not always entirely clear how if they're important. And I feel like I had this moment in the climax of the game where I realized that everything was important, and everything mattered, and everything was related in a really sort of eureka moment that made me get a little teary. I was just overwhelmed by how well done and emotional it was. There's I'm not going to spoil anything, but yeah, that moment really blew me away. And I don't totally understand all of it. I think that the game gave me a lot of pieces so that I could sort of assemble it into some semblance of an understanding. Not dissimilar to how I feel about something like a David Lynch movie, like Mulholland Drive, where the mystery is never... There's no sort of Scooby-Doo moment where they pull the mask off and say, Old Man Jenkins, the amusement park owner, it was you all along. Instead, careful and nuanced and astute viewing will give you the clues you need to assemble the answer yourself. There is no definitive answer from the author himself, but I think that you can generally feel, if you put the work in, that you solve the case yourself, which is so much more satisfying. I can't even begin to say how much more satisfying that is. And that was how this felt. There is a sort of Scooby-Doo moment to a degree, in the sense that there is a single person who committed the murder, and or in my playthrough, I did find this person, and that person did admit to doing it and why. And also there is concrete evidence about who you are, your name, your age, You can find your history, you can find these things out in the course of the game. But there were two specific things that really interested me. One is about a sort of bigger picture implication of why the murder happened that isn't fully explained. And then also a sort of mystery that may be the origin of your memory loss. Possibly, but maybe not. And I really liked that. And I'm really curious to play through the game again and see if I learn more a second time around. Yeah, it just... Man. This is one of the best video games I've ever played in my entire life. I can say that with no hesitation. This is a game that is truly a watershed moment, I think, in gaming. I think that we are going to start feeling the ripples of this game in the very near future. I think that there are going to be games like this game coming, and I'm very excited about that. Quickly, I was going to say about the Switch port. So this game was originally intended for PC. It's a point-and-click game, isometric RPG. I was a little worried about how the control scheme would transfer over to controller for console, and it's okay. It's pretty good. Instead of clicking places to go, you just move with the left stick. This does present the problem of you get stuck on the scenery a lot, and movement can be kind of annoying and tricky because it's not always clear which direction you're supposed to take to get from point A to point B. And then you can hold down the left bumper on the Switch, and it will highlight the things that you can interact with, and then you can use the right joystick to select between them, and then push A to pick one to interact with. But this is also a little janky and broken, where especially after you first load into a new room, it won't want to highlight things, or it won't want to move between them. And you have to sit there for 10 or 15 seconds, like repeatedly trying to select the thing you're trying to select before it will actually let you do it. The major problems with the Switch port are, to a lesser degree, for me at least, pretty severe frame rate issues and audio lag and distortion. Not constantly, but often enough that I noticed it, and I don't really care about things like that, so if I'm noticing it, it's probably really bad. And then the big one was crashing, hard crashing. Like I said, this is about a 30-hour game. I had it crash 8 times in that 30 hours, which is like about as many times as I had Cyberpunk crash. And Cyberpunk was pretty notoriously crashy. And then the double whammy with that is this game, it does have an autosave feature, but it's not very good. It maybe saves once every 5 hours. And so, since it's crashing, and it only crashes during load screens, it got to the point where basically anytime I knew I was going to have to go through a door, I was saving the game just to be safe in case it crashed after this, the first time where I lost an hour of progress. Not great. The other big problem, load times. Load times are brutal. They're very long. I would say that each load is 30 to 40 seconds. And that doesn't sound maybe that bad, but then it starts to add up. Where, say for instance, you're out on the street, but you want to go talk to Classier up in her room on the roof of the hostel. So you have to go into the hostel, 30 to 45 seconds. Walk across it and go up the stairs, another 30 to 45 seconds. Go into her room and up the stairs there, another 30 to 45 seconds. Then you're in that room, then you have to go out on the balcony, another 30 to 45 seconds. So you've played, you've moved for 20 seconds, but you've had 2 to 3 minutes of load time. And then after you're done talking to her, you have to do it all over again in reverse order. So I had my phone with me so I could scroll Twitter for, 30 to 45 seconds during these load times, because they would stack up, especially when you had to do, if you're going from one place to another, you're going to have a bunch of them in a row, and it's a lot. So my suggestion is, if you can play this on PC, that is how you want to play it. The Switch port, I've heard that there are similar problems with the PS4, PS5 port. It lets you play the game. You can definitely play it. And it's a great game, and it should be played. And so if you can't run it on your PC, like I can't run it on my PC, play it on Switch. That's fine. But you should play it on PC if you can. You'll thank me later. Also, the game has a fuckload of text, and playing it on the console, on the Switch, it's a little small, kind of hard to read, probably eye strain. If you don't have great eyesight, it's probably going to be a pain in the ass. So again, I think PC is going to be better there. Although I played it on TV, which made it easier to read. Man, this game had such interesting things to say. I think a lot of people criticized it for being sort of nihilistic and mean-spirited, where, it presented you with the ability to have your character believe in things, but then would just sort of mock you for your own beliefs. But I think that's less about the game mocking you and more about the character that you're playing as being a conflicted and complicated person, and being a person who's full of a lot of doubt, like most of us are. For instance, like I mentioned, I undertook the communist social quest, vision quest, but constantly, there would be points where, you saw the obvious choice to take the communist route, but you're like, like, I'm a leftist, but, like, I'm not really, like, a staunch communist. I don't know if that's really what Rowan, would say or whatever. It feels a little try-hardy. And then it would also do things like, people don't believe that you could be a revolutionary because you're a cop. You're a militant arm of this neoliberal coalition government that has, struck down the communists and put its people under oppression. So when you meet the real communists, they don't trust you because you're a cop. And that's, yeah, that makes sense. But I think that what was interesting was, I think one big tell is, like, in the original version of the game, most of the characters were not voiced. This new Final Cut has it's fully voiced. That was, besides the political vision quest, that was the other big addition, is the full cast, fully voiced for the whole game, for the 1,000,000-word script. Big undertaking. But in the original release, there were just a handful of characters that were voiced, and the people who Kurvitz got to voice them were, you had Dasha Nekrasova of the well-known leftist podcast Red Scare, playing Classier, the mysterious woman in the hostel with you. And then you had a number of the men of the Chapo Trap House leftist podcast. You had Will Menaker as the character Sealang. You had Felix Biederman as the leader of the Scabs, who were trying to get in to work in the harbor during the strike. And then you had Virgil Texas, the now disgraced and no longer associated with Chapo because of his inappropriate relationships with minors. Very cool guy. He played the mysterious smoking man on the balcony of the apartment building overlooking the lot where the murder took place. And then, of course, Matt Christman as well, from Chapo, played Titus Hardy, who is the leader of the sort of militant police-like wing of the dock workers union. So, the fact that he chose to get these people who are known for, I'm not going to get into the whole dirtbag left thing that these guys are all associated with. And my thoughts on that, it's not pertinent and too long to get into now. But I think that's a big tell, from where Kurvitz is coming from, where he is a leftist, but it's also sort of like the main thing. There's a point in the game where you're thinking about communism, and there's a line where, like, one of the major parts of being a communist is making fun of and complaining about other communists, which is sort of the way that I feel like Chapo operates. This game, it's also, if you watch this right when this is published, this is on sale on Steam right now. They're doing a thing for RPGs, so it's 45% off, almost half off, so it's marked down to $22 on Steam. It's going to be $40 normally anywhere else. I paid $40 for it on Switch. And that's through the 25th. That's on sale on Steam. And it does go on sale pretty regularly. When I first bought it to try and play it, and then it wouldn't run, I had gotten it for 30% off. So, put it in your Steam wish list, and you'll get that email when it goes on sale. If you don't want to, it is worth the full price. This is a game that you're gonna get more out of than 95% of full price $60 AAA games. I can guarantee it. And I really, this game has succeeded in ways that I am very happy with. It's sold very well. I believe it's sold over 1 million copies. And then also, at the Game Awards, the year it came out, it won a ton of awards. It won 4 awards, which at the time was tied for the most that any single game had won. And I think that we're going to feel the ripples of Disco Elysium for years to come. And I'm really excited about that. I think that games that have a very intense focus on story and quality of writing and quality of characters, and that games that have a message, that have an agenda, that have something to say, I think that's really important. I think we need more of that. I think that, it's only amongst the boomers is there even a question anymore of, are video games art, right? Roger Ebert was a boomer. I mean, he wasn't a boomer. He was older than boomers. But, he's famously said that video games could never be art because he's old and stupid and has bad opinions. But he's dead now, so it doesn't matter. We've reached a point where video games are art. I think mostly, the most people in the world can agree on that. But, it's a young art. It's it's the youngest art, really. One of the youngest arts. And we're still innovating. We're still pushing boundaries. We're still seeing what is possible. And Disco Elysium is a really great and really important game because it does things that nobody has done before. And it's going to be the first in a line of games that will come after it that is going to change the landscape of video gaming. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Yeah. Play it. It's so good. You won't regret it. I promise. And one thing that I think is really cool about this game too is that if you don't play that many video games, you know, I know that there can be a lot of barrier where you don't have necessarily the muscle memory, the hand-eye coordination, the reaction time that has been built up by someone like me playing games my whole life. You know, and games can be hard, and that can be frustrating, and it can make things impossible to play. But the really cool thing about Disco Elysium is it doesn't require any physical skill. You know, it doesn't require you to get good or anything like that. Anybody can play this game. All you need to be able to do to play this game is read English, and that's it. And that's really cool. You know, I think they're, you know, I've professed before that, you know, my favorite game is Undertale. And I was just talking yesterday with my friend Ellie about how much I love that game, and she was like, "Yeah, you know, it seems like it's really good, but I tried to play it and it's just too hard. You know, the bullet hell stuff is just too hard, and she couldn't do it." And that's fair. You know, that's that's really fair. You are not going to have that problem with Disco Elysium. Yeah, so that's my thoughts. Man, really had a good time playing this. And I'm excited to play it again. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.